The sound of distant fireworks echoes through the darkness. Then silence. You know what's strange about New Year's Eve? We celebrate it as if midnight is some kind of shield, like crossing from one year to the next will somehow protect us from what came before. We gather in crowds, we drink, we cheer. We convince ourselves that the calendar flipping over means a fresh start. But time doesn't care about our celebrations. And sometimes, in those moments when we're most convinced we're safe, surrounded by thousands of people all believing the same lie, that's when everything falls apart. This isn't about supernatural entities or haunted hotels. This is about real terror, the kind that happens when human chaos, bad decisions, and pure malice collide with our most celebrated night of the year. The kind of horror that made headlines, that was captured on video, that left families staring at empty chairs at the dinner table wondering how a celebration turned into a nightmare they'll never wake up from. Tonight, I'm sharing 7 true events that happened on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. 7 moments when the champagne stopped flowing and the screaming started. 7 reminders that sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the shadows, it's what happens when we step into the light, together, convinced nothing can touch us. If you're drawn to slow-burn horror rooted in real encounters, the kind that doesn't rely on jump scares, but leaves something behind, subscribe to the Dark Index and turn on notifications. Because some stories aren't meant to be told out loud, and the ones that are, tend to follow you. A long pause. The sound of a crowd counting down in the distance. Let's begin where celebration meets catastrophe. December 31st, 2014. Shanghai, China. The Bund Waterfront District, one of the most iconic skylines in the world, where colonial architecture meets modern glass towers across the Huangpu River. On this night, as the old year bled into the new, an estimated 300,000 people flooded the area. 300,000. Picture that for a moment. Not a stadium. Not a controlled venue. A public waterfront with narrow walkways, staircases, and viewing platforms never designed to hold that kind of human density. Chen Wei was 23 years old. She'd come with her boyfriend and 2 friends, excited to watch the light show everyone had been talking about for weeks. They arrived early, around 9 p.m., and managed to secure a spot on the raised platform near the Chenyi Square. The crowd was already thick, but it felt festive. Electric. Everyone was smiling, taking selfies, wrapped in scarves against the December cold. Chen Wei remembered thinking how beautiful it all was, the lights reflecting off the river, the buzz of anticipation humming through thousands of voices speaking a dozen different languages. But here's what most people didn't know, the Shanghai government had actually cancelled the official New Year's event that year. There was no formal light show planned. What happened instead was that someone, to this day it's unclear who, released promotional flyers and coupons styled to look like official event tickets. They spread across social media. People believed there would be a spectacular show. So they came. Hundreds of thousands of them, converging on a location that had no event staff, inadequate security, and no crowd control measures in place. If you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, in the woods, on an empty road, or in a place that felt wrong, share it in the comments. Your experience may become the next entry in the Dark Index. Or it may already be written there. By 11 p.m., Chen Wei noticed something shifting. The crowd wasn't just packed, it was compressing. People weren't moving with purpose anymore, they were being moved by the mass of bodies around them. Her boyfriend grabbed her hand tighter. They were on a raised viewing platform that connected to the street below via a narrow staircase, maybe 12 feet wide, with metal railings on both sides. That staircase was the only way up and the only way down. At 11:45, someone started a rumor that money was being thrown from a building above. It wasn't true, but rumors don't need truth to create chaos. They just need fear, confusion, or greed. People on the ground level surged toward the staircase trying to go up. At the exact same moment, people on the viewing platform, feeling the dangerous compression of the crowd, tried to push down the stairs to escape to open ground. Two human rivers, flowing in opposite directions, colliding in a space barely wide enough for two people to pass side by side. Chen Wei said the sound changed first. The festival chatter dropped away, replaced by something else, sharp voices, not angry, but urgent. Confused. Then someone screamed. Not a playful scream. The kind that cuts through noise and makes your blood stop. She turned and saw people at the top of the staircase stumbling, their bodies tilting at wrong angles. And then they fell. Not one person. A wave of them. When you fall in a crowd that dense, you don't fall to the ground. You fall onto people. And those people can't get up because more people are falling on top of them. Within seconds, it's not a crowd anymore. It's a pile. A mountain of human beings, limbs tangled, faces pressed into backs in concrete, airways closing. Chen Wei's boyfriend shoved her sideways, hard, pushing her toward the edge of the platform where the crowd was slightly thinner. She lost sight of him immediately. People were climbing over each other now, not out of malice, but out of pure survival instinct. She heard bones breaking. She described it later as a sound like greenwood snapping. She heard a woman near her whispering a name over and over, the same name, like a prayer that had stopped working. She managed to grab the railing and pull herself along the edge, away from the center of the crush. Her hands were stepped on twice. She felt ribs compress against the metal bar. For 15 seconds, she couldn't draw a full breath, just these shallow gasps that didn't seem to reach her lungs. When she finally spilled out onto a side street, her legs gave out. She sat on the curb, shaking, trying to call her boyfriend. No answer. She tried her friends. No answer. Around her, other survivors stumbled out of the crowd, some bleeding, some silent and wide-eyed, some vomiting from the pressure that had been applied to their abdomens. Emergency services couldn't get through. The streets were clogged with people, and many in the crowd still didn't know what had happened. They were still celebrating, still waiting for a light show that was never coming, while 30 feet away, people were dying under the weight of other people. It took nearly 40 minutes for responders to reach the center of the pile. 36 people were killed. 49 were critically injured. Chen Wei's boyfriend survived but spent 2 weeks in the hospital with a collapsed lung and fractured ribs. One of her friends didn't make it. She was 20 years old. Her name was Lu Yang, and she suffocated beneath 7 other people on a staircase in the middle of a celebration. Here's the thing that stays with me about this story: it wasn't a building collapse. It wasn't a fire or an explosion. It was just people. Human bodies, in a space too small, moving in different directions, and the laws of physics doing what they do. No villain. No monster. Just a cascading failure of planning, communication, and crowd dynamics. And 36 families started the new year planning funerals instead of futures. The Shanghai government launched investigations. Officials were disciplined. New crowd control laws were written. But laws don't bring back the dead, and regulations don't erase the memory of what it feels like to be crushed so tightly you can't scream, can't breathe, can't do anything but wait to see if the pressure stops before your body does. Chen Wei doesn't celebrate New Year's Eve anymore. She stays home. Doors locked. Lights off. Waiting for midnight to pass somewhere quiet, somewhere she can't hear crowds, can't feel the press of strangers, can't remember the sound of greenwood snapping. Let's move from accidental horror to intentional evil. January 1, 2017. 1:15 a.m. Istanbul, Turkey. The Reyna nightclub, perched on the edge of the Bosphorus Strait, where Europe and Asia meet in dark water. It was one of the most exclusive clubs in the city, the kind of place where champagne cost more than most people's rent, where celebrities and diplomats came to be seen. On New Year's Eve, it was packed with nearly 700 people from 24 countries, all dressed in their finest, dancing under chandeliers, convinced they were untouchable in their bubble of wealth and Western decadence. Leyla Soylu was a waitress there. 24 years old, saving money for university. She'd worked New Year's Eve for 3 years running because the tips were extraordinary, drunk rich people throwing cash around like confetti. The theme that year was glamour and gold. Everything glittered. The dress code was strict. Security was tight at the door, or so everyone believed. Leyla remembered feeling exhausted by 1 a.m., her feet aching in heels, but the energy in the club was still electric. People were kissing strangers, taking photos, laughing too loud. The DJ was playing something with a heavy bass that made the floor vibrate. That's when she heard the gunfire. Not fireworks. She knew the difference. Fireworks pop and crackle. Gunfire cracks. It punches the air. And it was close, so close she felt the sound in her chest. The music cut out. For maybe 2 seconds, there was this bizarre silence where 700 people tried to process what they just heard. Some people thought it was part of the show. Some people laughed nervously. And then the screaming started. The gunman entered through the main entrance at 1:15 a.m., dressed in black, face partially covered. He killed the police officer and security guard at the door first, execution style, close range, no hesitation. Then he walked into the club and started firing into the crowd. Not randomly. Methodically. He aimed. He adjusted. He reloaded. Leyla dropped to the floor behind the bar. Around her, glass exploded as bottles shattered from stray rounds. She heard people running, chairs being knocked over, bodies hitting the ground, some diving for cover, some not getting up again. A man fell next to her, blood spreading across his white shirt in a pattern that looked almost geometric. His eyes were open. He didn't blink. The gunman moved through the club like he was searching for something. Survivors later said he seemed calm. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't frantic. He executed wounded people where they lay. If someone was crawling, trying to reach an exit, he walked over and finished them. This wasn't random violence. This was hunting. People trapped on the upper level jumped into the Bosphorus, a 30-foot drop into freezing water in the middle of winter. Some broke bones on impact. Some couldn't swim in their formal clothes, weighed down by soaked fabric and panic. But they jumped anyway because staying inside meant certain death. Leyla stayed behind that bar for 11 minutes. She counted them. She stared at the man next to her who wasn't blinking and counted seconds, trying to keep her breathing quiet, trying not to sob, because any sound might draw attention. She heard footsteps close by, heavy boots on tile. She heard the gunman reload at least twice, the mechanical click of a magazine sliding into place, and then more shots. Closer. Then farther away. Then close again. When the gunfire finally stopped, she waited. Silence can be a trap. She waited 2 more minutes, listening to people crying, groaning, calling for help in languages she didn't understand. Then she ran. She didn't look around. She kept her eyes on the exit and ran through a hallway slick with something she didn't want to identify, past bodies she didn't let herself see clearly, and out into the freezing night air where police were finally arriving, 7 minutes after the attack began. 39 people were killed. 79 were injured. The victims were from 14 different countries: Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Israel, Canada, France, Tunisia, India. They were business executives, students and tourists and staff. They came to celebrate the new year in a place that promised glamour and safety. Instead, they were murdered by a terrorist who later claimed he did it for ISIS, who said the club represented moral decay, Western influence, and the corruption of Islamic values. The gunman escaped in the chaos. He blended into the panicked crowds fleeing the scene, ditched his weapon, changed clothes, and disappeared into Istanbul's sprawling neighborhoods. It took Turkish authorities 17 days to find him. His name was Abdulkadir Musharrapov, an Uzbek national with ties to ISIS. He was arrested in a raid in the Esenyurt district, hiding in an apartment with his 4-year-old son. During interrogation, he showed no remorse. He said he trained in Syria. He said he chose Reyna specifically because it was a symbol of Western lifestyle. He said he was proud of what he did. Layla doesn't work in nightlife anymore. She can't. The sound of champagne corks popping sends her into a panic attack. She's in therapy 3 times a week, but she still has nightmares where she's back behind that bar, staring at the man who isn't blinking, counting seconds, hearing boots on tile getting closer and closer until she wakes up choking on her own breath. What do you do with that? How do you move forward when your brain has recorded every detail of the worst night of your life in high definition and replays it without your permission? How do you trust crowded spaces again? How do you celebrate anything when celebration itself becomes the target? Here's what haunts me about this one: it was planned. It was deliberate. Someone looked at people dancing and laughing and decided they deserved to die for it. And he almost got away. Not all New Year's horror ends in mass casualties. Sometimes, terror wears a different face, sometimes it's wrapped in spectacle, in flames 60 stories high, in the surreal image of a building burning like a torch while fireworks explode around it. December 31, 2015. Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The address Downtown Hotel, a 63-story luxury tower standing directly across from the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. This was the heart of Dubai's New Year's celebration. Over 1 million people were expected to gather downtown to watch what was advertised as the greatest fireworks display on earth. Every hotel room with a view was booked months in advance at obscene prices. The city had spent millions on choreography, pyrotechnics, and publicity. At 7:30 p.m., 4.5 hours before midnight, a fire broke out on the 20th floor of the Address Hotel. No one knows exactly how it started. Investigations suggested it began on an external terrace, possibly from a cigarette or electrical fault. But the how matters less than what happened next. Within 3 minutes, the fire spread vertically up the building's exterior cladding, the decorative panels covering the outside of the structure. These panels were made of aluminum composite material with a polyethylene core. In plain language, they were fuel. The fire didn't climb the building. It raced. Amira Hassan was staying on the 42nd floor with her family. They'd paid $8,000 for 2 nights, a once-in-a-lifetime splurge to ring in the new year with a view of the Burj Khalifa. She was in the bathroom when the fire alarm went off. Her first thought was that it was a drill. 5-star hotels don't burn, right? They have systems, sprinklers, and safety measures. But when she opened the bathroom door, her husband was standing at the window with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. The entire side of the building was on fire. Not a floor. Not a section. The entire visible face of the tower was engulfed in flames that licked up toward the sky, orange and white and impossibly tall, like something out of a disaster movie. Except this was real. She could feel the heat through the window glass. She could hear the roar of it, a sound like wind and breaking and consumption all at once. They ran for the stairwell. Emergency lighting flickered. The stairs were packed with people, some calm, some crying, some carrying children or elderly relatives. The descent from the 42nd floor took 19 minutes. 19 minutes of not knowing if the fire would spread inward, if the stairwell would fill with smoke, if the building would hold. Amira's daughter, 7 years old, asked if they were going to die. Amira lied and said no. Outside, a surreal scene unfolded. 1 million people had gathered to watch fireworks, and now they were watching a skyscraper burn instead. Phones were out. People were filming, live streaming, posting to social media in real time. Fire trucks couldn't get close because of the crowds. Debris was falling from the upper floors, burning pieces of cladding, glass, furniture, raining down onto the street below. Police were trying to evacuate the area while simultaneously maintaining the security perimeter for the fireworks show that was somehow, impossibly, still scheduled to happen. And here's the thing that made this feel like a fever dream: at midnight, the fireworks launched. While the Address Hotel was still burning, while firefighters were still battling the blaze, the Burj Khalifa lit up with explosions of color and light. The largest New Year's fireworks display in the world went off as planned, and in every photo, every video from that night, you can see both, the celebration and the catastrophe, existing in the same frame. 16 people were injured. Miraculously, only one person died, a man in his 60s who suffered a heart attack during the evacuation. But the psychological toll. The residents and guests who had to flee down dozens of flights of stairs not knowing if they'd make it. The workers who stayed behind to help others evacuate. That doesn't show up in casualty statistics. Amira made it out with her family. They stood on the street in their evening clothes, covered in soot, watching their luggage and passports burn 60 floors above them, while tourists around them cheered at the fireworks. She said it felt like being in two realities at once, one where people were celebrating, and one where she just escaped death. The Address Hotel was severely damaged. The fire burned for over 24 hours before being fully extinguished. Investigations revealed that the exterior cladding didn't meet proper fire safety standards, the same type of cladding later found on Grenfell Tower in London, which burned in 2017, killing 72 people. Dubai rebuilt the hotel. It reopened in 2018 with new safety measures, new cladding, a new name. But no one who was there that night forgets what it looked like, a tower of fire standing next to the tallest building in the world, while 1 million people watched and fireworks exploded overhead like the apocalypse decided to throw a party. Let's shift now from public disasters to private horrors. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't a crowd or a terrorist or a fire. Sometimes it's the person sitting across from you at dinner. The person you've known your whole life. The person who snaps when you least expect it. December 31st, 2014. Houston, Texas. Christian Gomez was 23 years old, living at home with his mother, 58-year-old Maria Gonzalez Gomez. By all accounts, he was a quiet guy. No criminal record. No history of violence. He worked part-time, played video games, and kept to himself. His mother had been asking him for weeks to move some boxes from the garage into storage. Not a big ask. Just one of those mundane parental requests that pile up during the holidays. But Christian didn't move the boxes. And Maria kept asking. And asking. And on New Year's Eve, she asked again. What happened next depends on whose narrative you believe, or rather, it depends on Christian's narrative, because Maria can't tell her side anymore. Christian later told police that something in him just broke. That the nagging, the pressure, the constant requests built up until he couldn't take it anymore. He went to the garage, but not to move boxes. He grabbed an axe. Maria was in the kitchen, preparing food for their small New Year's Eve family gathering. Christian walked up behind her and struck her in the head with the axe. She fell. He struck her again. And again. And then, in an act of violence so extreme it defies any logic of momentary anger, he decapitated her. He left her body in the kitchen and called his aunt, Maria's sister, and told her to come to the house. When she arrived, he was standing in the driveway, covered in blood, and said, "I killed my mom." Police arrived to find Maria's body in the kitchen, her head severed, placed near her torso in a scene one investigator later described as one of the most disturbing I've encountered in 20 years. Christian was arrested without resistance. He didn't try to run. He didn't try to lie. He just stood there, blank-faced, and admitted what he'd done. During his interrogation, he showed almost no emotion. He explained the nagging, the boxes, the pressure. He said he'd snapped. But here's the thing about snapping: people snap and yell, or break things, or storm out of the house. They don't calmly retrieve an axe, murder their mother, decapitate her, and then call family members to report it. That's not a snap. That's something else. Something colder. Psychologists who evaluated Christian diagnosed him with depression and possible dissociative episodes, but not legal insanity. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong. He just did it anyway. Christian Gomez was sentenced to 55 years in prison. He'll be 78 years old before he's eligible for parole. Maria's family members gave victim impact statements describing a woman who was kind, who worked hard, who loved her son despite his struggles. They said they couldn't understand how asking someone to move boxes could end in murder. And honestly, neither can anyone else. Because that's the part that crawls under your skin and stays there, the disproportionate response. The absolute chasm between the trigger and the reaction. It reminds us that we can never fully know what someone else is capable of, even people we've lived with, even people we love. It reminds us that sometimes, horror doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a mask or carry a manifesto. It just sits quietly across the table, until one day, it doesn't. Here's a different kind of New Year's nightmare, sudden, random, and rooted in something that's supposed to be fun. January 1, 2016. Gippsland, Victoria, Australia. A public fireworks display, the kind that happens in 1,000 towns across the world every New Year's Eve. Families spread out on picnic blankets, kids waving glow sticks, everyone staring up at the sky waiting for the colorful explosions that mark the year's turnover. A 46-year-old man, whose name was withheld by his family's request, attended the display with his wife and 2 children. They'd arrived early to get a good spot, close enough to feel the concussive thump of the fireworks in their chests. The kids were excited. It was a warm summer night in Australia, clear skies, perfect conditions. The show began at midnight. Explosions of red, gold, blue, green, each one applauded by the crowd. 8 minutes into the display, something went wrong. A firework misfired. Instead of launching vertically into the sky, it shot horizontally into the crowd. It struck the man directly in the chest. Witnesses said the impact sounded different from the other fireworks, duller, more solid, followed immediately by screaming. The man collapsed. His wife and children dropped beside him, calling his name, trying to wake him. People around them scattered, afraid more fireworks would misfire. Event staff rushed over, calling for emergency services, but the nearest hospital was 25 minutes away, and this wasn't an injury that could wait. By the time paramedics arrived and loaded him into the ambulance, he was gone. The firework had struck with enough force to cause catastrophic internal injuries. He effectively died in front of his family, in the middle of a celebration, killed by something designed to bring joy. The fireworks company launched an investigation. Equipment was inspected. Protocols were reviewed. The conclusion was that it was a freak accident, a combination of a manufacturing defect in the firework itself and wind conditions that angled the trajectory. No one was criminally charged. The family received a settlement. None of it brought him back. His wife later said the worst part wasn't even the death itself, as horrific as that was. It was the sound. The sound of the firework hitting him, that dull thump, plays in her head every time she hears fireworks now. Every New Year's Eve, every 4th of July, every wedding or celebration, she hears it again. She can't take her kids to public events anymore. They tried once, 2 years later, and her son had a panic attack when the first firework went off. Think about that. A man takes his family to a sanctioned public event, does everything right, stands in a designated viewing area, and dies because a firework, a celebratory explosive, malfunctions and kills him. No warning. No chance to react. Just instant, random death in the middle of a crowd of people who came to feel wonder. It's a reminder that danger doesn't always come from malice or poor decisions. Sometimes it's just physics and chance. Sometimes you're just standing in the wrong place when something fails, and your life ends while people around you are still clapping. Now let's take a turn into the bizarre. Because not all New Year's horror is deadly. Sometimes it's just, deeply, unsettlingly strange. January 1, 2015. Pritchard, Alabama. Around 2:30 a.m., a couple returned to their home after attending a New Year's Eve party. They were tired, a little drunk, ready to collapse into bed. The husband parked in the driveway, and they walked toward their front door. The porch light was on. Everything looked normal. And then the wife saw him. A completely naked man, standing in their home's breezeway, the covered walkway that connected the house to the garage. Except he wasn't entirely naked. He was wearing two things, a sock and a Ronald Reagan mask. Not a shirt. Not pants. Just a sock on one foot, and a rubber mask of the 40th President of the United States on his face, the kind you buy at a costume shop for $10. He was standing there, still, staring at them through the hollow eyes of Ronald Reagan. The husband yelled. The intruder didn't say a word. He just turned and ran, barefoot on one side, socked on the other, completely naked from the neck down except for that mask, and sprinted into the darkness of the neighborhood. The couple called the police immediately. Officers arrived, searched the property, and found no sign of forced entry. The breezeway door had been unlocked, which the couple admitted they sometimes left that way. But nothing inside the house was disturbed. Nothing was stolen. There was no evidence the man had even tried to enter the home itself. He was just, standing there. Waiting. Watching. Police reviewed surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera and confirmed the incident. The video shows a naked figure with something covering his face moving through the yard and then fleeing after the couple's return. But the footage wasn't clear enough to identify him. And despite a search of the area and interviews with neighbors, the man was never found. No one ever figured out who he was or why he was there. Was it a prank? A dare? Was he on drugs? Was he mentally ill? Was there some darker intention that got interrupted? No one knows. The couple installed security cameras, motion lights, and new locks. But the wife said she still thinks about it constantly. The image of a naked stranger wearing a Ronald Reagan mask, standing in her breezeway in the middle of the night, not breaking in, not stealing, not attacking, just standing there, silent, in that eerie plastic face of a dead president. She said the not knowing is the worst part. If he'd tried to rob them, there'd be a motive. If he'd attacked them, there'd be a clear threat. But this? This was purposeless, inexplicable, and somehow more disturbing because of it. It was an intrusion without reason. Violation without violence. Just the pure unsettling reality that someone was in their space, wearing almost nothing, hiding behind a mask, and they'll never know why. What do you do with that? How do you feel safe when you don't even understand the threat? When the person who invaded your home didn't follow any logical pattern of criminal behavior, didn't fit any profile, didn't leave any trail. He's still out there. Maybe he's done it again. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe he lives 3 streets over and walks past their house every day on his way to work. They'll never know. And that's its own kind of horror. Let's end with one more story, one that combines panic, violence, and the kind of split-second decision that destroys multiple lives at once. January 1, 2016. Daytona Beach, Florida. Main Street was packed with New Year's revelers, thousands of people celebrating in the streets, bars overflowing, music thumping, the usual chaotic energy of a party town on the biggest night of the year. Police were out in force, expecting the usual drunk and disorderly incidents, maybe a few fights, nothing too serious. Robert Mazzaros, 28 years old, was celebrating with his fiancée. They'd been together for 3 years. Friends said they seemed happy. He had no violent criminal history, no record of domestic abuse. By all accounts, he was just another guy having a good time on New Year's Eve. Until he saw the police. Accounts differ on exactly what triggered him. Some witnesses said he looked paranoid. Others said he seemed fine one moment and completely unhinged the next. What's clear is that at some point in the crowded street, Robert Mazzaros made eye contact with police officers, panicked, and decided he needed to get away. He pulled out a pocket knife. Not to threaten the police. Not to defend himself. He started stabbing people in the crowd around him, apparently trying to clear a path, to push through the mass of bodies blocking his escape. Random people. Strangers. And then, in the chaos, he stabbed his own fiancée. She screamed. People scattered. Someone tackled Mazzaros to the ground. Police converged and arrested him while his fiancée bled on the pavement, staring at him with an expression witnesses described as pure shock and betrayal. 3 people were stabbed in total. His fiancée suffered serious injuries but survived. The other 2 victims, a man and a woman who had nothing to do with him, who were just standing in the wrong place, were treated for non-life-threatening wounds. During his arrest, Mazzaros was incoherent. He kept saying he had to get out, that they were coming for him. Police found a small amount of marijuana on him but nothing that would explain the level of paranoia and violence. Toxicology reports later showed alcohol and THC in his system, but nothing else, no hallucinogens, no stimulants, nothing that would typically cause a psychotic break. Psychologists evaluated him and found no evidence of schizophrenia or major mental illness. The leading theory was a panic attack combined with intoxication, leading to a catastrophic lapse in judgment. But that feels inadequate, doesn't it? Panic attacks don't usually involve stabbing 3 people, including the person you're planning to marry. Robert Mazzaros was charged with 3 counts of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. His fiancée testified against him. She said she didn't recognize the person who stabbed her. That the man she loved would never do that. But he did. And she has the scar to prove it. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His fiancée broke off the engagement. The other 2 victims settled civil suits. And somewhere in a Florida prison, Robert Mazzaros is still trying to explain to himself why he pulled a knife in a crowd and started stabbing people, including the woman he claimed to love, because he was afraid of police officers who weren't even focused on him. Here's the thing that makes this so disturbing: there was no plan. No motive. No premeditation. Just a man who panicked and made the worst possible series of choices in the span of maybe 10 seconds. And those 10 seconds ended his life as he knew it, traumatized 3 people, and turned a celebration into a crime scene. How do you prevent that? How do you see it coming? You can't. And that's what makes it terrifying. Sometimes the danger isn't a stranger in a mask or a terrorist with a manifesto. Sometimes it's the person standing next to you who just breaks and takes you down with them. A long silence. The distant sound of a clock striking midnight. So there you have it. 7 true events. 7 different kinds of horror, all wrapped in the same paper, the promise of celebration, the hope of a fresh start, the belief that gathering together under lights and music and countdowns will protect us from the darkness. But darkness doesn't care about our calendars. It doesn't respect our holidays. And sometimes, the most dangerous moment is when we convince ourselves we're safe. Remember this, not everything that calls out to you wants you to come back. Follow the Dark Index for more accounts pulled from places that don't show up on maps, and don't always let people leave unchanged. The sound of fireworks in the distance. Then silence.